One thing I have noticed time and time again throughout my life is that the day after sexual activity, my face tends to look more drained and my eyes more sunken than usual. I first recognized this in my late teens, when I had no concept of semen retention or anything like that. It is not controversial to say sex takes something out of you. The time leading up to sexual release and the time following it are two completely different physiological states for the man. Before ejaculation, he is filled with energy, passion, and emotion. Seconds after, he becomes exhausted, emotionally drained, and less attracted to the female. The process of ejaculation causes a very strong change in the body, and almost every man knows this feeling. Think about the fluid that leaves a man's body on ejaculation. When you look at this fluid in a microscope, it's absolutely teeming with life. The spermatozoa are swimming around frantically. No other substance in the body displays as much vitality as the semen does. So is it any wonder that loss of this vital substance depletes our own energy and life force? The substance we eject is life itself. It has the ability to forge a new human being when connected to the egg, and it is this life force that makes you attractive. Sperm represents the forces of life, and may be compared to a spring exhibiting vital tension. The watch runs with regularity by means of the tension of its elastic spring. If that power is weakened, the friction and resistance of the wheels cause the watch to stop. So it is with man. Expend the semen, and the vital force is exhausted, for all of the functions are obedient to its energy. There is nothing left to propel the delicate machinery of the functions, which, from sheer exhaustion, come to rest. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Attractiveness is really just a signal for abundant life. Attractiveness is generally representative of good health, and those in good health create healthy offspring. The female wants to carry over as much life with as high a chance as possible of survival for her offspring. The best to carry the life is the most healthy, and that often means the most attractive. For a woman, choosing attractiveness means choosing a higher chance of survival of her children, and this is her ultimate aim. From this we can extrapolate that activities that severely deplete our organism's integrity may negatively affect the level of attractiveness of the individual. As we know, in biology, one of the most energy-intensive processes of the body is reproduction, and all that it entails. In order to reproduce, the body utilizes much of its own somatic energy for the purposes of creating a new offspring. This energetic burden in men has been attributed to gonadal activity and semen production, as creating semen and using the body's nutrients and nerve energy is very costly on the organism. If you ever wish to deeper understand the burden of semen production on the organism, simply look at organisms that don't produce semen, that is, spayed, neutered, and castrated creatures, and you will see how much longer their lifespans remain when not reproducing. In almost all animals studied, the difference in lifespan is significant. Many men on retention or sexual abstinence, however, still engage the mind in sexual thought, perhaps even edging, thinking that they are getting away with it as long as they are not releasing. Every sexual excitement is exhaustive in proportion to its intensity and continuance. If a man sits by the side of a woman, fondles and kisses her for 3 or 4 hours, and allows his imagination to run riot with sexual visions, he will be 5 times as much exhausted as he would be by the act culminating in emission. It is the sexual excitement, more than the emission, which exhausts. Thoughts of sexual intimacies, long continued, lead to the worst effects. To a man whose imagination is filled with erotic fantasies, the emission comes as a merciful interruption to the burning, harassing, and wearing excitement, which so constantly goads him. Rioting in visions of nude women may exhaust one as much as an excess in actual intercourse. There are multitudes who would never spend the night with an abandoned female, but who rarely meet a young girl that their imaginations are not busy with her person. This species of indulgence is well nigh universal, and it is the source of all other forms, the fountain from which the external vices spring, and the nursery of masturbation. A young man who allows his mind to dwell upon the vision of nude women will soon become a victim of ruinous passion, and either fall under the influence of lewd women or resort to self-abuse. The man who has no control over his mind and allows impure thoughts to be associated with the name of every female that may be suggested to his mind is but committing adultery in his heart, just as guilty at heart as though he had committed the deed. So far as the record is preserved, unchastity has contributed, above all other causes, more to the ruin, exhaustion, and demoralization of the race than all other wickedness. And we shall not be likely to vanquish the monster, even in ourselves, unless we make the thoughts our point of attack. How can such an exhausting habit not make its signs clear upon the face and countenance of the individual? The semen is the essential element of human life, and to produce it requires a contribution from our own life source, a redirection of energetic investment from our somatic cells, which supports our own life, to our germline, which supports reproduction. How can we contribute to our germline without losing attractiveness? It is impossible. Everything that contributes to our attractiveness is that which boosts our own life. More life force generally equates to more attractiveness. This is not controversial, we all know this. It is the reason why society generally pays more attention to the youth than the aged. The youthful signs are the signs of life. One writer from the 1800s went deep into details of the physical effects of excessive release, writing, "Let not the intensely prurient, yet seemingly modest victim of self-pollution lay the flattering unction to his soul, that from the eye of his fellow mortals he can conceal his unmanly practices. It is written upon his forehead. The physiognomy, that faithful mirror of the soul and body, gives clear indication of the internal disorder. The complexion and plumpness which jointly confer a youthful look, and which is the sole substitute for beauty, for without this even beauty produces no other effect than cold admiration. This complexion and plumpness are the things that first disappear. A leanness succeeds. The skin becomes rough, often of leaden tinge. The eyes lose their brilliancy, and by their languor express that of the whole frame. The lips lose their vermilion hue, the teeth their whiteness. The hair falls off, and it is no uncommon thing for the whole body to become bent and distorted. Abashed, the sufferer shrinks from the gaze of his fellow man, fancying suspicion in the eye of everyone who looks upon his sunken, haggard, pale, unmeaning, inexpressive face. His dull, lackluster eye, his thin and tremulous form, which all betray him to the practical observer. For self-pollution entails upon its victims marks as legible to the eye that can understand them as the scars of smallpox, and this proves a striking fulfillment of the prophetic warning. There is nothing done in secret that shall not be revealed, nor hidden, even from the recognition of mortals, that shall not ultimately be made, even to them, evident as noonday. Shall we not therefore raise our testimony against these vices? We can see from this description that not only facial features, but the qualities of one's mind influence how others perceive attractiveness. Excessive sexual activity and frequent release were said to deplete a man of his testicular secretions. his very essence of manhood, leaving him more submissive, timid, and effeminate. These traits, when displayed in men, often provoke repulsion rather than attraction. Men who fail to show typical masculine qualities such as bravery, assertiveness, and strength rarely elicit the instinctual feelings of respect or desire from those around them. It is difficult to depict a more truly miserable being than the slave to licentiousness, his imagination burning with filthy, unnatural glow, his bodily organs taxed to the utmost, weary and jaded, refuse to obey the stimulus of that never-slumbering depravity, which goads his fancy in the darkness of night, in the dreams of his broken rest, and in the worse-than-dreamy abstractions of the cheerless day. He is tormented with desires he can never gratify, shut out from those enjoyments accorded only to virtuous moderation, the blossoms of youth, perhaps the flower of manhood, the supremacy of mind, all degraded, obliterated, gone. I have long felt this exhaustion during periods of frequent masturbation and seen directly its effects on interactions with women. After much sexual activity, the passions are dampened and man becomes unable to inject his charm or charisma into the conversation. Conversing with women not long after sex is always exhausting, as we are not only drained, but oftentimes in a deflated mental state. Post-ejaculation feelings of guilt or shame are often present. These feelings have an effect on our disposition that we may not realize, but those around us easily pick up on. We often become more timid and nervous in character. Eye contact becomes weaker, and physical movements become somewhat hesitant. Our physiological response to these feelings creates an awkwardness in our interactions, and thus rather than feeling attractiveness towards us, females tend to feel apprehensive or even repulsed. It is difficult to accurately articulate this change in the air that occurs when interacting with women as a licentious man, but most of us have experienced it firsthand and thus know exactly what it is this feeling of constant sexual release does to our social relations. For many, their first experiences of semen retention turn such interactions on their head, and for the first time in a long time, they begin to feel their own manhood and manliness again, and through this, attraction builds from the opposite sex. We may even notice receiving more eye contact when out in public, interactions becoming more engaging and exciting, and even people beginning to approach us. It is like something within us has become more magnetic, and people are more inclined to gravitate towards us. Magnetic is exactly what we are becoming. From a biological perspective, the more secretions we conserve, the more substances of man we contain within ourselves. If what divides a man and a woman is the reproductive function and subsequent secretions, then it is exactly these secretions which furnish our manhood. Thus, more abundance of them is more masculinity, and stronger masculinity attracts stronger femininity. These are the opposing poles of sexual attraction, of sexual magnetism. In the great battery of human life, man usually is the primary or positive pole, woman the negative or receptive. The one gives, the other receives. The connection of the one with the other opens a circuit through which the electric forces of the universe flow into both. But in order to construct the perfect battery, the natures of the husband and wife should be attuned to harmony, should be unweakened by abuses. In a word, each should be keyed to harmonious vibrations with the other. Where the conditions are such as these, a store of life energy is gathered in the body, which throws out all worn-out atoms, sends new life into those that are exhausted, revivifies the brain cells, and thus provides a more efficient instrument for mental work, and generates a store of personal magnetism, which inevitably draws to the individual the esteem of the people he deals with, as well as every good thing in the universe. This is the regenerative effect of the sex function, rightly, intelligently, and purely exercised. In today's modern world, the overexpenditure of sexual resources is standard practice. Most men are depleted, and very few are aware of this tremendous power that resides within them, which should not be wasted in sensory indulgence. It is a strange fact that there are many men of intelligence and learning, even of considerable scientific attainment, so blinded by the strength of their sex nature, which they have never learned to curb or control, that they declare that their sex impulse is a divinely implanted instinct which should always be gratified and must never be suppressed under penalty of ill health and nervous diseases of every kind. Think for a moment what this means. A man should give rein to every slightest impulse of sex passion that constantly grows stronger and more dominant because constantly indulged and fostered. He should degrade his divine privileges until they become a foul morass in which he wallows as the swine. He must so fill his nature with sensuality that he is utterly incapable of purity of thought in any direction, and cannot look upon a member of the opposite sex of any age without lewd and sensual thoughts. His very glance towards them becomes an offence. Is such a man free, or is he a slave in chains of his own forging? We often fail to realize that our own life story needs not be verbalized. It is imprinted in our appearance. Just as a drug addict's appearance often reveals his habits, the man consumed by licentiousness, too, cannot hide it. His eyes, his posture, and even the energy he radiates gives him away. It is for this reason that we must become aware of our own sex instinct and seek to gain control of it, lest we become a slave to it. We must aim to develop a chaste mind, a mind that is pure and free from sexual longings and depraved acts. The sex function preserved for procreation and conjugal relations only. The avoidance of spilling the seed in vain. When man develops such a mind, he not only elevates himself, but he elevates those around him, particularly his wife or partner. Good traits and deeds inspire such traits in others. It is up to us men to set this example. This is how degeneracy in society will be defeated. Elevate the moral qualities of the sexes and purify the sex instincts, and men and women will once more be capable of a true and real love, where now they are merely the playthings of an uncontrollable but transient passion. This feeling that will elevate us and our collective consciousness is of course the feeling of love, and this feeling is at odds with the feelings of lust. That is to say, while lust occupies the mind, our ability to feel and express love is diminished, and as such all the wonderful and pure traits that result from love fail to develop. The face of a man consumed by love is strikingly different than the face consumed by lust. We can see a man's loving nature easily in his face. It emanates from his features and expression. Think back to your first love in life. How intense were those feelings? The feelings towards our first love. Most of our first crushes or loves in life are of course unrequited, and this leaves a kind of longing in our hearts. Lust, on the other hand, brings out the negative and selfish traits from within us, and over time these traits lower our trajectory in life. I have noticed this with respect to my own life, that when I was constantly thinking of sexual thoughts, the circumstances of life were much worse. I was having trouble romantically, socially, physically, and of course mentally. I felt like I was dying of some mystery illness and spending much time trying to get a diagnosis. I had blood tests, teeth issues, and had some friends saying they were worried about my appearance. I distinctly remember after entering the workforce that I had no chance to engage in sexual activities for over 6 months, and life drastically improved. Though this abstinence period was unintentional, it really made an impact in my mind. The period before starting work and the period after getting my first apartment were 2 times I was very active sexually, and during both those times, I felt like my life was falling apart in many ways. Most notably on the outside was perhaps my appearance. I felt like I had aged many years in a short time during this period. It began to dawn on me that the periods of sexual abstinence had me looking and feeling much better. And this was about the time I discovered what was called Nofap, which I first started experimenting with. This was years before I ever attempted it long term, and at the time I could only retain for a few days to a week at a time. But even those short abstinence times were having a positive effect. I joined a gym, grew some muscles, and started looking better in the mirror again. People were giving me compliments on my fitter appearance, and I started having more luck dating too. From a first-person perspective, it's very hard to see whether the attraction benefits of semen retention are more to do with physicality or mentality, though I assume it is both. One's mentality is very much entwined in his physiology. When you look better, you feel better, and when you feel better about yourself, other people notice. More people are drawn to you. More opportunities come your way, and your life heads towards a more prosperous future. If you are always thinking sexual thoughts, you are always sending your most valuable arterial blood to the testes, and thus less of it towards all other organs of your body. You may have heard that semen is not made from blood, but in fact it is largely derived from blood-delivered nutrients and materials. The sperm is of course produced in the testes. However, the testes receive blood from the spermatic arteries in order to create sperm. Thus, the process of sperm creation very much directly involves the blood. Written in the 1800s. All eminent physiologists who have written on this point agree that the most precious atoms of the blood enter into the composition of the semen. A healthy man may occasionally discharge his seed with impunity, but if he chooses, with reference to great physical strength and endurance as in the pedestrian, boat racer, prize fighter, or explorer, or with reference to great intellectual and moral work as in the Apostle Paul, Sir Isaac Newton, and 1,000 other instances, to refrain entirely from sexual pleasure, nature well knows what to do with those precious atoms. She finds use for them all in building up a keener brain and more vital and enduring nerves and muscles. It is this oxygenated blood that our body uses to bring life to the organs, to animate the mind, and to keep the body in a healthy state. This pure blood is only a small portion of the total, known as arterial blood. The rest, venous blood, has already delivered much of its oxygen and carries the byproducts of the body's work. While still necessary, it is the arterial blood, vital and full of energy, that transports this life force or energy of nutrition to the parts. If we use this blood for sexual indulgence and excessive sperm production, then there is less of this blood to go around to nutrifying all other organs and processes. Thus, quality of all other aspects of the body will be less due to the less supply of nutrition. And from this we can understand how the visual appearance too will inevitably deteriorate if we excessively divert our bloods towards the sexual organs. This life substance that's present within the blood is said to be all the more refined and potent when converted to semen. Aristotle referred to this life element as the pneuma, and said that it was analogous to the element of the heavenly bodies via the ether. It was said in ancient Greece that when the pneuma was abundant in the body, the result was strength and power. The reason we refer back to such ancient concepts is because there is no scientific quantification of the life force itself. We cannot bottle and measure the life force scientifically in a person, though we are very much aware of its presence. The concept of pneuma perhaps most accurately articulates this force within the body, and Aristotle wrote that the semen was the carrier of pneuma, that it was the principal element of the soul. From my 8 years of semen retention, I very much feel this to be the case. My soul, my life energy, or whatever it is that makes me feel alive, is more abundant within me when retaining. I feel more alive, and after release, this life force feels depleted. It looks depleted. Others sense this depletion and react accordingly. We are not attracted to depleted life. We are attracted by an abundance of it. It is no wonder that the release of such a precious substance alters our appearance, when the very activity drains that force from our body. The body and face of a man constantly releasing is a body that is closer to death. His juices are used up and dried up. He is like a flower wilting away at great speed. Aristotle even contributed the loss of hair to the loss of semen, as it depleted the vital heat from the body, and the first affected part being the scalp and hair. A living man without the substance of life present in his body is known as a zombie. The appearance of a zombie is shocking for the same reasons. Deterioration and absence of life is ugly. It is unattractive, and we feel repulsed by it. These, to a lesser extent, are the feelings and effects of a chronic masturbator. He is releasing that life substance and essentially zombifying his entire being. It is no wonder that others avoid such a man. Remember this the next time you are tempted to start fantasizing. What you hold in your body is the source of life, and releasing that life means your body will show less life. It will attract less and fade away from this world faster than the man who conserves it. So do what it takes to keep your life force inside of you. Good luck.